this session entitled Seeding Innovations in Farm Sector. We now move on to Fireside Chat. What should be the unit of planning? Are we going back to the drawing board? Sounds interesting? Yes, indeed. Please bear with us while we get the stage ready for this fireside chat. And let me share, meanwhile, with you all who all are going to be a part of this fireside chat. As we have already received and welcomed earlier in our midst, Mr. Arun Myra, Member Planning Commission. And also joining us for this discussion is Mr. Amarjit Sinha, former Secretary, Ministry of Rural Development, Government of India. And Mr. Myra will be taking the lead on this conversation. This, of course, is a fireside chat, which I have already shared with you all. What should be the unit of planning? Are we going back to the drawing board? Meanwhile, we would like to introduce Mr. Sinha's other avatar also to you all. He's a celebrated author. He has written this book, which is entitled The Last Mile, and it is available for sale in Sharefare. So if you would like to grab your copy, he will be happy to autograph it for you. Don't miss the opportunity. So ladies and gentlemen, let's start with inviting them both to please join us on stage. May I request, amidst your applause, Mr. Arun Myra, Member Planning Commission, Mr. Amarjit Sinha, former Secretary, Ministry of Rural Development, and of course, the celebrated author of The Last Mile. Don't forget to grab your copy and get it autographed from him. So let me pique your interest by starting with the question, are we really going back to the drawing board, sir?
Are we? Okay, working? Thank you. Well, I must thank Accor and yourself for enabling something to happen, which I didn't think would happen in the near future, but is happening right now. I'm sitting with a person whose thinking I really admire. It was Amarjit. Amarjit has been introduced broadly to you about the many key positions he has occupied in the government of India. And I would say he didn't occupy a position. He always used it to change something and change things, as I noticed it, fundamentally in the way we were thinking about, whether it's education or rural development, which is mentioned here already as a former Secretary of Rural Development. Going back to the drawing board. Are we going back to the drawing board? Actually, I'm going to make a statement, and that is what I wanted Amarjit to educate me about, to help us to understand. Why should we go back? What's wrong with the present drawing board? Yeah, things are happening, GDP is growing, next year will be 7% or 8%. It's all fine. Why don't we just carry on? More, put more energy, more resource, and we'll be all right. We had the G20 here in India last year. It was a remarkable process compared to the G20s previously. One key difference was that G20s have always been the top meeting, opining, making a resolution, and then disappearing. Then they come again and talk about the same problems, whether it's climate change or inequality or the financial system of the world broken. And we come back and we talk about the same problems. And the solutions are not being found. This time at the G20, our Indian Prime Minister said that based on all the research that had been done by the G20 countries regarding progress made, towards the SDGs, that as of last year, which is midway in the journey towards the SDG goals, the world had achieved only 12% of the goals. In other words, in the remaining years, starting this year, 2024, we've got to accelerate the rate of change to 12 times. Climate change, again, scientific studies that yes, we have been making some improvement in the reduction in the emissions of carbon into the atmosphere per unit of global GDP growth by a little bit. Renewable energy aa rahi hai, people are being more careful perhaps in what they do, little bit. But at this pace, we realize we already are facing the climate crisis. So we have to achieve the original goal set of 2% in a certain year, the original one, not the one we keep shifting the goalpost, original one, we should be increasing the rate of reduction of, you should increase the rate of reduction of carbon going into the atmosphere to again 7 or 8 times faster than we're doing this year, starting now. This can't be done. You can't change things so radically with the same thinking that has caused the problem. I studied physics, and I revere scientists. Albert Einstein had said, and others also, that you cannot solve the systemic problems you are facing with the same type of thinking that has caused the problem. So, therefore, I say we need to go back to the drawing board of how we make progress. Progress towards what and how we go about making progress. There's something wrong, obviously, in the way we are organizing to get results. Yeah. So here's where I come with my experience in the government, and before that as a consultant, very objective and data required to manage things, and as a physics scientist, of course, is I've realized that statistical methods and big data analytics are the wrong methods for improving the health of any system. We want to improve the health of the Indian system, which means the society, the economy, and its environment. And we are using, like everybody does, we need better statistics, better data. Now computer ke saath, big data and analytics, all statistical approaches. Why is this wrong? Well, let's take our own bodies as an example. My body, your body, is a complex system with many different things which must be healthy and working well. My liver, my heart, my stomach, my kidneys, my brain. We today have great instrumentation which can measure the condition of every part of my body. And now they say, you can wear something with artificial intelligence. It will tell you how your body is functioning. So we have the instruments to measure different parts of the body, their health. And we've had specialists who will know how to treat your heart when your heart has a problem, a specialist who knows how to treat your liver when your liver has a problem. But there's hardly anyone available today who will ask me, are you really feeling well yourself? So we come to the holistic approach to medicine, which some people have always advocated in India, कि हम तो पूरे इंसान को ही ठीक करते हैं, आपको ये गड़बड़ है, उसके लिए थोड़ी पुड़िया होगी. I have to help you to get your spirit of recovery and to then get your body to move all its spirits together, and you will recover your health. So each part can't be fixed separately. In fact, in modern medicine, it's becoming worse and worse that a specialist, as I go to our fancy hospitals, he'll give me some prescription and some surgery for one part, due to which some other part, which was not that bad, starts to having a bad effect. So I go to the other specialist. So he treats that with no consequences, relies for something else. And I'm spending more and more money and getting more and more anxious, and my ability to look after myself is even worse, right? So looking at the SDGs, back again as I started, The SDGs are 17 problems, big complex problems, each of them, some in environmental areas, some in economic areas like livelihoods and incomes, some are social areas like inequity. They're all there, 17 of them. Each of these problems occurs in different forms in different places. The economic problem is not the same in Bihar as it is in Virginia and the United States. Similarly, the environmental problem is not the same in the Thar Desert as it is in Kerala. So all the problems are there, but as they appear in different parts of the world, they're very different. They're very different. So if one has to solve 17 problems appropriately in each part of the world, how many different shapes would the solution have to be? And some would say, no, all 17 problems don't appear everywhere because some places are not near the ocean. There's some ocean-related SDGs. Let's say there are 7 problems will appear, some economic, some social, some environmental, in every part of the world, every district of the world. How many possibilities are there of the shapes in which this problem will appear, the combined systems problem? Mathematics, I'll come back to that. 7 problems taken out of a set of 17 possible problems can combine in 93 million ways. So we need 93 million solutions if we want to solve each problem holistically to make each person capable of healthily living and managing their life thereafter. In this case, the unit is some district or some part of the globe. The other I was mentioning, the unit is one human being whose health has to be improved. So here we are. We have been getting through science that we must find a good solution to the environmental problem and tell everybody that they should pursue this solution, a good solution to the education problem, and all of you must pursue the same solution. Now, isn't this the design of every government program, every philanthropic program? It's very scientific. I'm not saying only government. The philanthropies do it the same way. And they say that thereafter, the particular problem they are concentrating on will be solved very efficiently and effectively. But their solutions are not lined up with the solutions of the other parts of the body whose problems have to be solved. So we do need a very different approach to understanding systems and statistics and data, which looks at the conditions of individual things and gives you a big data set. And then you say, well, what is the health of the system? Then you put some weightages. You give all an equal weight. And so I get the health of Amarjeet is this, and Arun Maira is that, and yourself is that. Then we start ranking them. Who is the worst off? On the composite measure. So we come by that thing that which country is the least developed, next developed, and higher developed, and presume that all the countries that are least developed are in the same condition, and they need the same solution to get to the next level, and the same solution to get to the next level. And it can lead to, I could say, very inappropriate solutions. For example, the stages of growth says that countries must get out of agriculture very fast and get into industry very quickly so that they can develop and grow. But here we are discussing in this terrific seminar of Accor that our problem is we can't just push people out of agriculture into industry when the industry can't absorb other people and give them decent livelihoods. And so we need to be very careful about the standard solutions which are derived out of study of big data and then transformed into what we believe is the only model. The only model. So Amarjeet, this leads to then my question. That knowing this, I hope you believe that we do need to go back to the drawing board in terms of how we think about complex problems, as well as back to the drawing board about how we intercede in the solution of those complex problems. And in that, I'm putting it out, and I hope you believe, I know you do because of the work you've done in aspirational districts, that we have to consider a smaller unit, it's like a district or a block, or I know from your work that it could even be a community, something smaller than a block, is the unit that has the agency and the capability to improve itself. And if we do believe in human rights and human agency and Purna Swaraj, it has to be those people, whether it is scientifically correct or not. They must be the agents of their own change. So we can't think of people as individual beneficiaries, whereas every philanthropic program and every government program will count the outcomes in terms of the number of beneficiaries.
Sir.
Yes?
Yeah.
Why is this so? Why can't we change our thinking?
So, thank you for that question. It's about going back to the drawing board. Yes, we do. And I'll try to explain on the basis of all the evidence at my command, to say every word on the basis of specific evidence. We need to go back to the drawing board, among other reasons. So those of you who read the live Mint, 5 days ago, there was a beautiful, short, crisp piece, which was the Mint View. And the Mint View said, yes, India is the fastest growing large economy at the moment. Macro indicators are very robust. At the macro level, things are looking very robust, very good, very fine. That same Mint View went on to say, unfortunately, at the micro level of households, that reality is a little different. The dignity, well-being that we talk about, we don't seem to be there. I begin with this problem statement of how do you match micro-level human well-being realities, lives of dignity, inclusive India, with the good macro indicators that have been talked about. I'll also go further to say, when we look at the global examples, human capital and its deficit defines us. We may have done many things right. Post 1991, we did get liberalization right. And if I look at the economic rates of progress before and after, from the average growth rate of 3.5% over the first 4 decades of independent India, we did move on to the 7% in the long term during this period. But unfortunately, in those first 4 decades, our performance on primary education and primary health was dismal. I can illustrate this with very simple evidence again. If you were to plot on the X and the Y axis, Japan, India, South Korea and China, and just look on the other axis, when did they achieve 100% universal female primary education enrollment? Enrollment, not even learning. And that's what gives you the answer. Japan achieved it at the turn of the 20th century. China, India, South Korea were about the same in the 30s, but South Korea chose to jump up and achieve it in mid-1960s. China did it in the mid-1980s. We have struggled to do it at the turn of the 21st century. So that's where the answer lies. If somebody tells you that economic growth and female primary education has no correlation, it is nothing but falsehood. Clearly, progress of nations have depended on their ability to harness the human capital. Having said that, in our own country, and that's where when we try to learn from evidence why we need to go back to the drawing board, we do find the Niti Aayog came out with the multi-dimensional poverty report, not the one which has come out yesterday, but the earlier one, where they had said that the multi-dimensional poverty is down to about 15%. And there too, it had pointed out the case of Kerala and Tamil Nadu. Kerala reported a multi-dimensional poverty of 0.55%. Tamil Nadu reported a multi-dimensional poverty of 2.2% as per the Niti Aayog 2023 report. If that is the case, we needed to understand a little better what worked in these states. Now, my book, which is available here, those of you who wish to read it online, the Routledge publishers, I have an open access agreement with them. Any of you can read it free of cost online. If you wish to buy it, it's available here. But the argument that I've tried to build, one of the hypotheses, and again I'm going on evidence. We often remark that poverty in southern Indian states is lower than northern Indian states. But do we go into the factors that contribute to it? Even if we do, we try to be very monocausal in our responses. Whereas the reality is far too complex. It doesn't lend itself to monocauses. You need to see how different sectors actually interact with each other, interface with each other. When I studied the southern Indian states in some detail, I could zero in on 6 factors which seem to have contributed, and that's another reason why we needed to go back to the drawing board. What did they do right? The starting point was the education of adolescent girls at secondary, higher secondary, and higher education. In all these states, more so in Kerala and Tamil Nadu, what is happening between 2010 to 15 and present in the northern Indian states, where girls' enrollment at secondary is catching up with boys. Today, the ASAR has released the 2023 report. It is on the 14 to 18 age group. The most pleasant thing in that report is that the gender differential in enrollment in secondary education, as per the ASAR report, is 0.2%, which means most girls, even in Bihar, even in West Bengal, Orissa, Jharkhand, are enrolling at class 10. And the most clear data on this, my own home state of Bihar. I recall 2004, for every 66 boys, there were 34 girls writing the board exam. Now it's about 50-50. Yes, it has made a difference. The second point, which happened in the southern Indian states, once secondary enrollments and higher secondary, higher education participation goes up, the immediate next step is that fertility rates come down very sharply. They came down in the southern Indian states. The effect, not so much of health facilities, but much more of adolescent girls in secondary and higher secondary education, has shown up in the rest of the country as well. As all of you are aware, NFHS 5 presents before us the fact that nationally we have reached the replacement level of fertility much before what was predicted earlier. Let me tell you, it's not happened so much because of the health facilities evolved. It has to do much more with the girls' education, and therefore development was the best contraceptive. The third factor, which is equally important, when adolescent girls cycle to school or use public transport to go to schools, it creates a new identity for them, which is different from all identities they've had in the past. They are nobody's daughter, nobody's wife, nobody's sister. They are a woman unto themselves. And when they travel in collectives, cycling to high schools, taking public transport buses to colleges, that new identity translates into the formation of women's self-help groups. Something that happened in the southern Indian states well before it started in the northern Indian states. The prime mover at that time, it began from Karnataka. Some of our friends from the civil society sector have been a part of this, but over time it has grown. And what do we find? These women's collectives create a new platform that influences decision making at community level. Universal coverage of women happened in the southern states well before we followed it up over the last 10 years to expand to the whole of the country. Today, state after state, Bihar Jivika, Orissa's Mission Shakti, Ajivika program in Jharkhand, Uttar Pradesh, Rajivika program in Rajasthan, Uttar Pradesh, all of them are racing towards full coverage of women from deprived households as part of women's collectives. That to me is a very positive sign, and some of the positive consequences are showing. The fifth factor in the southern Indian states had to do with the improvement in primary health care for maternal and child health. Because as we are all aware, If somebody falls in a household, who takes leave to look after the children? It's the women. If you want them to participate in skill development courses, higher education, employment, they need to have better medical care, especially maternal and child care, for their participation. The southern Indian states provided it faster. It's happened in the rest of the country also, but much less. But improvements in infant mortality, maternal mortality and all, especially after the rural health mission, lot of those gains are quite perceptible and visible. The sixth factor, which is about if I am educated up to 12th, I am also in a position to access skill courses. I can join a nursing school, I can join a tailoring school, I can join an ITI, a polytechnic, I can become an IT assistant. Along with it, if there is this arrangement whereby we are able to provide collateral-free bank credit, it makes the difference. Dr. C. Rangarajan, as the governor of the Reserve Bank of India 30 years ago, made this path-breaking move to allow for collateral-free lending to self-help groups. And when you put all these 6 factors together, you have poverty tumbling down. The fact that Kerala is 11th in terms of per capita income, but is number 1 when it comes to multidimensional poverty, 0.55%. The fact that Tamil Nadu is 2.2% multidimensionally poor. And I am quoting the Niti Aayog data before you. So friends, clearly we have lessons from abroad, we have lessons from home. The third lesson, which again why we need to go back to the drawing board, the point that Sir mentioned, is the level at which we plan. Do we plan from above or do we plan from below? If we plan from below, it's not something which will happen by itself. And the best example of this is the livelihood mission, the National Rural Livelihood Mission. It starts its operations from below. It doesn't come from above. The Mahila Samakhya program before this was a similar program which worked with women collectives from below. Now, what that entails is a completely different approach. Community participation or community collectives empowerment or gender empowerment is not something which happens just by itself. How do you provide for a platform of equals? How do you provide the human resources and professionals at the field level? And as many of you here are aware, who are the women who've made a difference to the livelihood mission? It didn't need World Bank consultants or other consultants. It only needed the community resource persons. And who are the community resource persons? These are women who've come out of poverty. These are women from Tamil Nadu, from Andhra Pradesh, from Kerala, from Bihar, who've gone to Arunachal Pradesh, Madhya Pradesh, every part of the country, lived for 6 months there, to constitute groups there, to make them follow the same ethics, to make them organize themselves similarly. These more than 500,000 foot soldiers are the ones who've made the difference. When you begin from the problem rather than come with a solution, you will have to be decentralized in your approach. So you have the community resource persons, you have the women's collectives. For a group of women's collective self-help groups, you have a village organization. The funding of the program is linked to your progress. If you've managed your savings arrangement through the Pancha Sutra principle well, we'll move on to the next stage of giving you a 10,000 rupee resource in perpetuity as a revolving fund. If you manage that well, we'll go to the next step of providing community investment fund, which again is a resource in perpetuity for village organizations to develop and provide for credit and linkages. Thereafter, we reach the banks. Now, in all our exercise, the human resource is the key. We have not planned even at the block level. We've planned lower than that. We've had cluster coordinators, cluster federations. Below that, the community resource persons. And more importantly, at each state, there's untied funds available. So funds and functions and functionaries are there at the cutting edge already. Something that we've been talking about, the local government and decentralization. The livelihood mission throws up an outstanding model of a human resource intensive, professional intensive community connect, which tries to build skill sets which are missing. For example, since it is working with farmers and women farmers in many cases, it created a new cadre of the community resource persons for agriculture called Krishi Sakhi. They were doing work on animal husbandry. They've created a new para-vet cadre of Pashu Sakhis who are assisting locally. So local problems with local solutions. Last example that I want to, again, evidence-based. I recall 2015, I was in the Rural Development Ministry, and we were struggling to push the IT-based payment systems across the country. Everywhere our problem was that the so-called banking correspondent, which was part of a commercial model of banks, was rarely visible in the remote panchayats where we needed them most. I don't blame them for it. We had something called a 1% model. If I do business of 100 rupees, as a banking correspondent, I got 1 rupee. Obviously, if he went to the remote panchayats, he would have made losses. Not even his travel cost would have recovered. And we were trying to push that. First time when sent the proposal to the Department of Financial Services, the immediate reply, oh, we have it all over. We have done it all. I said, please, the map is not the territory. Go and see what is the condition, and I can tell you that this is not working. First, we began by providing banks a bank sakhi. Now, these are not government employees. They are community employees, persons, community resource persons as bank sakhis. They assist families and the bank in getting applications filled up. We realized that is not enough. We need banking correspondents from among our women who are capable of running them. I am happy to report what began in that 2015 and the kinds of challenges. When you begin from the problem, you see it differently. Do you know that all the monies of women's livelihood were all in cash? Because as self-help groups operate an account with the president and the secretary signing together. Dual authentication was not provided on the IT platforms of banks. So then, even if they wanted to put their money properly through authentication and withdraw through authentication, the technology didn't allow them.
Amarjit, you're raising back to the drawing board in the mind. See, what he said is that we have the evidence in our own country. In fact, our country has been an example to the world of the new paradigm of local system solutions found by communities to complex problems, environmental problems, and their own livelihood and social problems. Alina Ostrom, she was the first woman to get a Nobel Prize in economics. In other subjects, Nobel Prizes have been given to women long before. In this one field, and it's the only Nobel Prize given for a social science, it happens to be economics. The first woman to get it was after 64 men. Right?
The collaborative governance work.
Yes, and what was the work? In 2009, she got this prize. It was for managing the commons. Governing the commons is the title of her book. She did her research in India and other poorer countries, and some in the fisheries in America and Canada and so on. And here she is. She has learned from us, telling the world, here is a solution. The world celebrates it. She came to India in 2009 when she got the Nobel Prize. And so naturally, we would want to, I guess you would think so, naturally people would want to listen to her. She was hardly invited to any public platforms. Thomas Friedman, who written The Earth is Flat, was there speaking. Who cared? So we asked in the Planning Commission this question to ourselves, that a society must learn to change itself from whatever it is to become what it wants to become. So if you, again statistically, look at two similar complex systems, two similar countries, which have progressed over a similar period of time differently, one must have learned faster than the other. So the World Bank said it's obvious, and let's do that research for you. China and India are very similar countries in size. We were in the 1980s very similar in income levels. And here we were in 2009, where China was, as an economy, some 5 or 6 times larger than us already. So in those years, you were mentioning the 30, 40 years, we were learning much more slowly than China was. They were a much better learning system. And yes, you're pointing out that they had been applying themselves to an understanding that in the system, it's women, it's education, and to build it up. I'm saying again, goes on in 2014. We have a new prime minister, and he's looking for, and he genuinely does, and therefore you can share those stories. He really does, looking for a new solution. And yet, Amartya Sen and Jean Drèze, people that you know, they were being criticized, and a new idea of development, not new, it was the 1990s idea of development continuing. We need to open ourselves to free trade and get investment in, and that is the problem in our growth. So my point is this, that in the mint, as you say, these papers continue to harp on how our growth is growing, and they want to worry whether it's going to be 2.7 or 2.2% and things like this. Yeah.
No, in fact, sir, I was just responding.
Why is it that in the levels that make policy, we don't change? In the Prime Minister ended my last thing and the question to just posing to you where the challenge is.
In fact, I wanted to highlight.
So
yes.
Say, he ended the G20. I introduced the G20. He at the end, pleading to all the leaders that we need a new human-centric model of growth, not a GDP-driven model of growth. And yet, why is it that his ministers keep talking about the GDP?
Sir, if I could respond to you, I didn't complete the point about the why we needed to go to the drawing board.
Yes.
Now, 2005 onwards, we find even on social indicators, there's been progress in India. But again, there's a challenge which has come up is the challenge of quality. Girls, when I look at the 42nd round NSSO, 1986-87, 69.23% 6+ females in rural India never enrolled in a primary school. 69, and I'm not talking about 1947. I'm talking about 1986-87, 42nd round NSSO. 6+ females. 69.23% not enrolled. 2014-15 is the NSS 71st round. For the first time, boys or girls, rural or urban, net attendance rates of boys and girls is the same. Clearly, the girls have voted with their feet. Sarva Shiksha Abhiyan and supply side initiatives created those spaces for buildings, teachers, teacher training, books, midday meals, uniforms, and so on. But in spite of it, the classroom processes very little changed. Learning outcomes remained a challenge. Why we need to go to the drawing board? We need to address this set of questions of the learning outcomes. We need to address the set of questions about health facilities and quality services. We need to address the challenge of nutrition. How is it that between National Family Health Survey 4 and 5, Sikkim has managed an 8-point decline on stunting? It was already low, it has become much lower. How did it address this? Bihar is high at 48% of stunting, but Bihar also managed a 5-point reduction. I have had a chance to study both very carefully, and it is no rocket science. What comes out very clearly, that is what the evidence points out, is that in the human capital sector, narrow departmentalism is not going to deliver the quality services that we are looking for. You need a horizontal, integrated platform of convergence very close to the community. Local government is a necessity if we want to make a breakthrough on human capital, funds, functions, and functionaries at this institution level. The ability to what the Constitution and the 11th and 12th schedule said, time is ripe because no longer can an elected panchayat leader arbitrarily function as a panchayat head. The women's collectives are a reality across the country. On a lot of these points, for example, the successes in pro-poor public welfare, which is one of the major successes in the last 9-10 years, what is it that was different? Panchayats and women's collectives have been a part of it. Identification of the deprived has been a very scientific process. The socio-economic census started earlier, 2011, completed in July 2015, became the basis of identifying who are these deprived households, who need to be supported. If programs have done well, and this was applied across programs, it is religion neutral, it is caste neutral, it is creed neutral. The Ujjwala program adopted it. The Pradhan Mantri Jan Arogya Yojana adopts it. Pradhan Mantri Awas Yojana Gramin has adopted the SEC deprived households as their target. The program for free electricity connection under Saubhagya adopted it. Now, as a consequence, irrespective of caste, creed, or religion, those who were deprived, living in a kacha house, single room, kacha walls, their houses will come up. So I think a lot of the learning is online, and the pro-poor public welfare programs, whether it is opening of bank accounts for women, Jan Dhan, whether it is accident and life insurance, whether it is Ujjwala and LED bulbs, whether it is electricity connections to households, sanitation, rural housing, lot of the gains are on account of local communities, community organizations, panchayats, and the last mile government functionary. What I call the foot soldiers of various programs coming together to deliver certain very finite and specific things. Why we need to go to the drawing board? Because this still does not resolve the challenge of human capital at the pace that we want. Yes, girls have voted with their feet, poor households have voted with their feet for learning and schools and vocation and skills. But are we able to provide it? No, it's not just a supply question. No, that's right. It's very much a question of grounding these programs within communities. We have to go back to the drawing board to ensure that local communities have the final say, to go back to say that schools would be managed by local communities, health facilities will be managed by local communities, nutrition initiatives will be on a same horizontal platform with the community at the local level with untied funds. The local community should be able to make the interventions which are required in local contexts. If a village is very resource poor, most households have undernourishment, we need to open a daycare center. The same ICDS center will not work there. So I think these are the challenges of local governance.
These are challenges of the local governance, and they are having a challenge with dealing with the present governance. And this is, you again made the case even more powerfully than I've ever heard before, that local system solutions found by communities to complex systems problems is the only way India is going to be developing faster. And you said that development is the solution to the problems. But what is the concept of development? And we are talking about making India by 2047 a developed country. At the moment, we are saying it will be a 10 trillion or 20 trillion dollar economy. That makes us a developed country? No. We know that. That doesn't solve the problem yet. So my thing is about the three layers of conversations. There are conversations and solutions being found on the ground, and women's groups are now becoming very central to those. Those are really high quality problem solving conversations. Okay? So then we have the problem people on the top. Thinking is very poor thinking. You may espouse the theory that it has to be local systems, but your actions, in effect, the theory in use is the opposite, And we are stuck in the middle because most of these people, all of them, they are people who appreciate the value of local communities finding a solution, and they're supporting them. When they need support from the people who have the money and the power to support them, to enable the development of the people in the country, ask them. It is not easy. So I say, I'm listening to as you are. You can listen to the conversations in our business papers and in those CII forums. They're not the same conversations. They're still stuck in the old paradigm. They're still not realizing that they have to change the way they think and work to enable the country to develop. So how are we going to solve this problem?
Yeah. In fact, I'm extremely optimist for 5 reasons. I'll explain all the 5, again, based all on evidence. The first and foremost, as I mentioned, adolescent girls in secondary and higher secondary education across the country is a very positive sign, further confirmed by the ASAR 2023 report today. The second point is the women's collectives. We had 25 million women in the livelihood mission in 2013-14. Today we have 100 million women in the livelihood mission across rural India. Clearly, women's collectives have come into their own in many states, and that's what really augurs well for a state. Orissa is a very good example where they have been integral to the development process. The third, reservation for women in panchayats does make a difference. Yes, it began with the Sarpanch Pati's chair next to the elected women Sarpanch's seat. That chair is now vanishing in many parts of the country. The earlier it vanishes, the better. It will make for a difference. The fourth, which is to do with the democracy that we are. Democratic politics requires engagement with local communities. After all, why is it that across all political parties, everybody wants to do something about women, women's collectives, and women's empowerment? What is it that politically, as our last few elections starting from 2019 onwards, every election there are more women voters than men who actually vote? If that is the case, after all, why did state after state start the cycle program for secondary education or scholarships for girls for secondary education? Because there was a political pressure that they are also a constituency. One of the challenges of the livelihood mission, because it's an informal organization, in many states, chief ministers provide full leadership to it across political parties. Nitish Kumar provides leadership to Jivika. Naveen Patnaik provides leadership to Mission Shakti in Odisha. Shivraj Singh Chauhan provided leadership to Ajivika in Madhya Pradesh. So across political parties, you will find that the women's collectives have been moved forward. This is the gain of democratic politics. And the fifth and the final point, which I wish to make, is that we are a country endowed, and many of you are sitting here, with very good professionals. What development processes often lack is the availability of more professionals who understand the problem better. It's not a question of magistrates doing managers' jobs. We need more managers in the system who understand the challenges of development. Unless and until we make these reversals, even in our public recruitment policies, because what was essentially a regulatory system of public order and revenue collection, we want to use for development. Have we modified our development processes sufficiently? States which have done that, Kerala is again an example, where local governments do take calls along with the Kudumsri women self-help groups. And when the two work together, they hold each other accountable. They also ensure that the benefits accrue to the poorest. Tamil Nadu did not push the panchayat government, but it constituted something called the Village Poverty Reduction Committee, whose membership belonged to those communities, the vulnerable social groups, and it is they who decide who the beneficiary of a program would be. Many states used the deprivation data of SECC, Jharkhand, Madhya Pradesh, quite a few states. Households with more than 3 or 4 deprivations were identified and special programs for them. Today you would have seen in the newspapers Mr. Nitish Kumar saying that these 9.68 lakh women who are identified as poor, government will provide a support of 2 lakhs to them. Now this is coming because once you have data, and data is possible, technology does help in cleaning up spaces. IT DBT in the last 10 years has done more for cleaning up the last mile challenges than anything else. But technology is only a means, it's not an end. It cannot be.
Amarjit, I'm listening and I feeling again and again, and you must be also feeling very heartened by 2 things. That the solution that you're describing resonates with what I've been hearing here, what these people are pushing ourselves to adopt, okay? Second, you're saying that there is enough evidence that's happening also. But then as you mentioned that to make it happen faster, those groups down there must get some professional management help. And that is where my problem comes. We have been, as you know, and I've been with a consulting company, putting consultants to help A, the government, and B, then through the philanthropy and government programs, consultants helping local communities. As you said, consultants who know development. I'm sorry to say that these consultants and the government presently have a different theory of development, you see. So my fear is that actually these people, they bring resources and they're paid also to do it. are slowing down the process. Right? We should be consulting the other way. I think we should get women with their way of thinking. The point is not to get more women into men's organizations. So we got inclusion. How many women have become CEOs of corporations? But the corporate is a different way of thinking.
Sir.
We want, I think, our economy and our corporation to work like communities. Yeah. You know, like a woman.
So that's why, sir, both the processes, developing community professionals. If I could give you one example on enterprise, the Rural Livelihood Mission has actually created a cadre of community resource persons for enterprise. Yes. We've had the Entrepreneurship Development Institute, Ahmedabad, and Kudumsri in Kerala work as the resource organizations. The mandate to them was to create these CRPs for enterprise who would work with those households who have taken credit to set up small businesses. They have to be knowledge partners. They have to be technology partners, they have to be market partners, they have to be pricing partners to actually guide and handhold local businesses to develop better. One of the experiments we carried out, it's more than an experiment now, the Startup Village Entrepreneurship Program. Unfortunately, not enough is heard about it in the country. It needs to be talked about. We went through this process. One difference was, of course, women had demonstrated their ability to make use of finances that they borrowed from banks. Sir, last 11 years, we have borrowed 8,06,000 crores for the SHGs directly from banks. And sir, our non-performing assets, NPAs, are 1.67%. These were resourceless women. They have returned the money. They haven't kept it with them because they follow a community-based recovery mechanism. They sit with the branch manager. Branch manager points out who are these women whose accounts are already need to be paid back. The women organize that payment and they come up with the microcredit plans to take loans. So now it's been demonstrated on scale, 8 lakh crores over 11 years with a 1.67% NPA. Surely the system is working. Where we needed to learn, and that's why the SVEP, for higher businesses, we needed more resources. So this time we said not only the women in SHGs, but even men from their families, we'll provide the support of a community resource person for enterprise. We'll give you higher order community investment fund at lower rates of interest. We'll provide the bank linkage to you. It has been evaluated, sir, more than 200,000, 2 lakh cases in about 246 blocks in the country. I am happy to report that each and every case, they have made more than 1 lakh of income in the very first year of their businesses. It's something which has been studied quite carefully. It's been possible because we have not left anything open. We have not expected enterprise to fly by night and grow. It's a nurturing process. Unless and until we invest in that, we need professionals, we need community professionals, we need hand-holding, we need technology partners. All that has to work together, and it's only possible in a decentralized frame with flexibility rather than try to do everything centrally. I think that's the point.
Please, I'm sure that you would like to ask him questions, yeah, because here's a resource that one can learn new things from. He's not the sort of person that you ask questions, ki abhi kya ho raha hai, kitna hoga, wo kab nahi hua. This is the new thinking. So I'm going to, it wasn't planned, it's supposed to be a fireside chat between you and me, and I've really got a lot out of it. But would you like to engage Amarjeet in a chat? Any questions? One or two? And just to you only, to him, not to me, huh? Because he's the resource here. It's lovely. Yeah, yourself, Rashmi. The lady in the front first. We said women must be heard first. Yes. And then we'll hear you.
Very, very stimulating, talk over here. And because when I came here, there was a word called aspirational district, aspirational block, for this particular segment. So somehow I did not hear that word of aspirational. So that was missed out. And why I'm bringing it in the drawing board here is because I've actually traveled from Jammu and Kashmir, and within Kashmir, there's a district called Baramulla. Now, within Baramulla, people would know more of it because of Gulmarg. And probably now, it's being talked about more because tourists are probably missing the snow. So it's again that climate change and all this discourse. But in my last visit to Baramulla, as a mentor secretary for the aspirational district program, so it was actually my first visit. So now it's not going to be the last, but it was my first visit. So Baramulla, the groups of women that were being talked about, so the groups are there, community organizations are there, a lot of aspiration is there. But at the same time, now today what they really need is, lot of the policy support, infrastructure support, besides the nudges. Nudges are also there. That you're there, you're going to be doing well. Now, what aspiration they had? Simple thing, like we need a permanent heart, not just like being, asked to go to exhibitions, sell our products for a few days, but we need permanent, like a heart, a regular heart there within Baramulla, within Tangmarg, which gives the tourist a place to first park and then go all the way to Gulmarg. So it has a promise. They understand their aspiration. They have a promise. They can look at a brighter future for themselves, and they know the way. So that's the kind of aspiration which today, in terms of when we are talking about speeding up, hastening the pace. So probably we need to now quickly start responding to these localized aspirations of all these groups of women, whether their opportunity to be able to provide meals in ICDS kitchen or midday meal, various kinds of opportunities. Thank you.
What it's like, people have an aspiration, they are willing to do more, but somehow the system is not understanding how to help the system.
Whatever I had to say,
Yes.
and in the context of aspirational districts and aspirational blocks, which I have been engaged with and studied very closely, one, it succeeded wherever community collectives and panchayats and frontline workers were part of the program integrally. Pro-poor public welfare programs have delivered very well. In fact, the second round of the Gram Swaraj Abhiyan, which I had the occasion to coordinate, worked only in the aspirational districts and worked among those households for 7 benefits: the gas connection, LED bulbs, bank account, Jandhan account, accident insurance, life insurance, immunization of infants and pregnant women, and provision for Ujjwala gas, LED bulb, bank account, accident, electricity connection, Saubhagya electricity connection. Now, no, it was not part of this. The Gram Swaraj Abhiyan covered these 7 things, and what the studies, the NFHS 5 based studies, while the aspirational districts have gained on pro-poor public welfare for sure, sanitation, rural housing, everything. But where a lot more thought needs to go is the point that I made today on education, nutrition, and health, which were the very much part of the agenda. There the gains are still not so strong. When I look at it from the quality perspective, participation, yes, but learning outcomes or very faster declines, these are sectors where the approach has to be more wholesome, where the entire institutional arrangements have to change. For some reason, we still have some gaps there, both whether we do it at block level. So the point about communities and local governance was in the context of difficult areas where breakthroughs are possible only if we begin with the problem rather than come with a solution. That's the point I wish to make.
Excellent. Thank you. That's one more thing. Yeah.
Thank you, both of you, for a very thoughtful discussion. Sir, my question is about capital market innovation, specifically blending and outcome-based financing, and how do you bring that to rural livelihoods? As you said, the SHE program has been quite successful. There's 8 lakh crores of lending, but at a small ticket size. And the challenge is in larger enterprise-based loans, still for micro entrepreneurs. Blending, of course, has been public capital, crowds in private capital at lower costs, like the CGTMEC scheme or SIDBI NABARD, but specifically on outcome-based financing. We have seen this notion of social impact bonds in education and healthcare, where the unit outputs are educational outputs or healthcare outputs. But now there's talk of doing this in livelihoods, specifically in the state of Madhya Pradesh. And Kedar sir was here today. The Lakpati Didi initiative for both farm and non-farm. So here's the question, right? The objective in these things is A, to crowd in private capital, to say that there needs to be more money, and B, to make that money more accountable and the activities more accountable. So 2 questions. What do you feel are the potential improvements in the SAG program that would make it more accountable? Honestly, it's a great program, but either it could be activities like training, outputs like getting a bank loan for the beneficiary, or outcomes like measuring the income increase. How do we make the program better? And what is your overall view on such financing instruments which bring in the private sector?
Thank you. When you say accountable, and I would say when we're connecting any initiative with someone from whom you're getting money, the question comes, accountable to whom? And with respect to what value? The language of valuation slips in too quickly when we're talking about human values. Yes. So this is the challenge I think that these communities have, that when they need the financial resources, they are needing, like we say, private capital, but the private capital also needs to look after itself, and it's got its own governance requirements. How are we going to be getting the best out of both to develop the country?
Let me answer your question and sir's commentary on that through 5 or 6 very specific examples where it has worked and where it has not worked. Where it has not worked, one challenge we face when we try to take it to scale, women's collectives want to grow very quickly, but it's not easy because there comes a time when working capital becomes a challenge. For them to access and leverage working capital, they have to be formalized. They have to have an income tax registration. They have to have an MSME registration. They have to do a lot many other things to be able to access and leverage the regular working capital borrowings to raise the scale of their businesses. The second example, where it is a little easier, an experiment we did with the National Dairy Development Board Services, not NDDB but NDDB Services, which sets up producer companies. Now we had these women's collectives in many milch cattle rearing regions of India, which are very difficult areas. Madhepura and Supal in Bihar, 2 districts of Madhya Pradesh. The entire Bundelkhand area of Uttar Pradesh spread across 7 districts. We set up dairy cooperative units there, not as a cooperative unit, as a producer company. I can tell you about all 5 of them. The principle we followed, no capital subsidy, but from the livelihood mission we promised them that all the managers they need, their salaries will meet from the livelihood mission for 3 to 5 years. The managers will be employees of the local producer company. They must know that by the 5th year, they must earn their salary by collecting more milk. They can't get their job. There are no jobs being given to them. I'm happy to report all 5 of them don't need a single rupee from the government. But milk is an easier sector. In fact, the Bundelkhand one, 2018, they started pouring milk. We are in 2023. What is the total revenue from milk sales? 558 crores. There are a total of 68,000 women who are a part of this. Milk is easy. We are now attempting with the farmer-producer companies. Challenges in many products, millets and others have come. Size is one issue. The taxation rules, as they apply to trusts and as they apply to farmer-producer companies, there are differences there. Many of them have been flagged by many of the civil society organizations working in them. We tried a novel experiment with the Tata Trust, where a foundation for development of rural value chains has been set up. Support has been provided for the professionals. Some of the early lessons are quite positive, but many challenges with regard to credit on scale, timely credit, markets, storage arrangements. Some of these value chains have gaps which need to be addressed. The 4th example is the individual one of SVEP that I presented before you. So the answer to your question, the volumes of enterprise are still not what they ought to be when you have a 100 million women base. That these challenges need more professionals, these challenges need more partnerships. In many areas, many states, private sector has also come up to partner. But what we have been doing is to present before every government department that these are our human resources, use them for your animal husbandry subsidy program, use them for your food processing program, use them for any other program where you want social capital to determine the progress of programs. And most departments have been happy with that progress. But again, we have not got the scale that we are looking for. Challenges of formalization and the other issues that I mentioned. Andhra Pradesh and Telangana has resolved it by creating an on-lending institution called the Stri Nidhi. It is almost like a bank registered under the Cooperative Act. And what they do is they are able to provide the credit needs of women within 24 hours. We have not reached that stage in most of the states. So many alternative models we are looking at. We had the Girish Chaturvedi committee which looked at it, and some other states are doing it. But the challenges are quite a few. It takes time, and as the study by Anjani Kochar of Stanford University, as also Pramod Kumar Singh from IRMA have established, it takes 6 to 8 years for any women's self-help group or a women's collective to come into its own. So we have to be patient with the processes. It's not possible to completely eliminate the time frame for these processes. It will take a little while for them to strengthen, become stronger, and to be able to contribute to larger businesses as we move forward.
Thank you. We're told that two of us can continue our chat somewhere else, but we need to leave the hall for other activities. See, the last thing that you said is very important, I think, which you said we've got to be patient. The processes, if they are natural processes, they have to themselves build their strength and take time, like producing a baby or a human being growing up. And we say we don't have time. So we keep doing the wrong thing. The point is to start the right process now and we get the results then. So we want to see more signs that more people are supporting the right process now. And your job, please keep doing it very well, is to keep convincing the powers that are, with the support of the powers that will be, the people, that this is the way for India forward. People planning their own futures, people making their own futures with the support of the government and money, not doing things to produce results for the government and money. We reverse it, but let's start. No, we have started already. Thank you for saying that. I'm feeling very hopeful that if you're on the right track and learning well, India will be, by 2047, a developed country. It won't be measured by GDP, and you tell me that. We don't need that measure. We need the real measure of what is good for us as people. So thank you. Thank you.
Thank you, sirs. Very heartfelt thanks to both Mr. Myra and Mr. Sinha. It's been an absolute pleasure to have you here with us, and I'm sure you feel very stimulated with that chat, and you're all enjoyed being a part of it. So once again, thanking you both. May I request you to please join us front and center for a photo op, and may I request you also to kindly accept a small token as a token of our appreciation and thanks. Yes, please. The more the merrier. Please do. So, ladies and gentlemen, we have almost come to the close of the day. This was day one of the Livelihoods India Summit. But before we bid adieu, please do remember to make sure to join us tomorrow at 9:30 a.m. sharp for a day full of incitement and very topical discussions. Tomorrow is again a day full of sessions and deliberations, so please don't forget to join us on time tomorrow once again, 9:30 a.m. Looking forward to seeing you all here once again tomorrow. Meanwhile, please do join us for some tea and snacks which is being served, and have a very pleasant evening ahead. Thank you once again. Have a great evening.